The galaxy is a vast and ancient expanse, filled with species that have long since surpassed the limitations of humanity. To many, Earth and its people are nothing more than a curiosity, a primitive race struggling to catch up to the wonders of the universe. Humans, with their limited technology and fragile bodies, are seen as weak, an afterthought in galactic matters. The Council of Galaxies, a powerful alliance of the most advanced species in the known universe, has little regard for humanity. They view the Terrans as unworthy of respect, relegating them to the fringes of galactic politics. Most Terran diplomats are treated with condescension, their offers of cooperation brushed aside with polite but dismissive smiles. The Council is far more interested in negotiating with the militaristic Xandari, or the ancient, mysterious Sholar, whose wisdom has shaped galactic politics for millennia. However, as much as the humans are disregarded, Earth's most notable achievement is their ability to survive. Despite their limitations, humans have endured where others would have faltered. They have faced disease, war, and famine, yet their spirit remains unbroken. The galaxy, however, is blind to this. In the eyes of the galaxy's leaders, humanity is little more than an inconvenience, a species struggling to find its place in a universe that has no need for them. On the fringe of galactic civilization, a rare diplomatic summit is taking place. The Council has invited representatives from across the stars to discuss the fragile peace between the largest factions in the galaxy. There is one unexpected invitation among the guests. A Terran ambassador, a token gesture by the Council to appease Earth's government, a move to demonstrate that humans have a voice in the grand scheme. They send Captain Jackson Riker, a soldier with a long history of military service, as part of the delegation. The Council, ever skeptical of humanity's worth, assigns Jackson to a simple duty. He will act as a bodyguard for the Terran ambassador during the negotiations, but his role is largely ceremonial. Jackson Riker, a battle-hardened veteran of many skirmishes, is fully aware of his position. He knows that the galaxy doesn't respect humanity, and he's learned to live with the prejudice. To him, this mission is nothing more than a formality, a reminder of just how little the galaxy cares for his people. Yet he stands tall and confident, knowing that humanity's true strength lies not in their technology or might, but in their unwavering will to survive and fight against all odds. As the summit begins, the delegates from various species exchange cold pleasantries, their conversations dominated by high-minded discussions of galactic policies and military strategies. The Terran ambassador is largely ignored, his words dismissed as insignificant. Yet, amid the silence of the meeting, Jackson's eyes scan the room, observing the alien dignitaries with a quiet intensity. He is a warrior, and he knows that appearances can be deceiving. Despite their disdain, the galaxy has yet to truly witness what humanity is capable of. The negotiations continue, and the Council remains unimpressed by the Terran presence, believing that humans are no real threat. They laugh at the thought of humans standing on equal footing with their superior species, but what they fail to see is that beneath the calm exterior of the Terran ambassador, there is a quiet storm brewing, waiting to break loose. The stage is set for a confrontation, one that will shatter the arrogance of the galaxy's most powerful species. For they have forgotten one simple truth: never underestimate humanity. The summit had barely begun when the first sign of trouble appeared. At first, it was subtle, a flicker in the air, a strange hum that buzzed through the floor beneath their feet. Then the doors slammed open, and everything erupted into chaos. Alien mercenaries, their armor sleek and dark, stormed into the chamber with blinding speed. Their weapons were raised, ready to strike down anyone who dared resist. They'd come for the delegates, and their message was clear. They would stop at nothing to ruin the fragile peace talks. The Council's security forces were taken completely by surprise. The alien mercenaries moved like a well-oiled machine, overwhelming the guards with precision strikes and advanced technology. Weapons flashed, and in moments, half the security detail was incapacitated. Panic spread among the delegates. Screams echoed throughout the room as several of the alien dignitaries scrambled to find cover. The Terran ambassador ducked behind a column, visibly shaken but unharmed. Jackson Riker didn't flinch. His eyes narrowed, scanning the attackers with a cool, focused gaze. While others cowered, he was already moving. There was no hesitation, no second thoughts. This was what he was trained for. The galaxy may have considered him weak, but they would soon find out how wrong they were. The first mercenary lunged toward the ambassador, their blaster raised. In a fluid motion, Jackson drew his sidearm, a sleek Terran plasma pistol, and fired in one smooth arc. The mercenary dropped to the ground before their weapon even discharged. Another soldier turned, taking aim at Jackson, but he was already gone, moving like a shadow, too fast for the alien to track. Jackson's movements were precise, calculated, and ruthless. In seconds, he'd disarmed another attacker, using the assailant's own momentum to send them crashing into a wall. The mercenaries were trained warriors, no doubt, but Jackson wasn't like them. He fought with an intensity that no one in the room had ever witnessed before. Each motion was deliberate, every strike designed to disable, not kill. His training wasn't in brute force, it was in efficiency. He moved through the chaos, neutralizing one attacker after another with clinical precision. The alien dignitaries, who had once dismissed him as nothing more than a ceremonial figure, watched in stunned silence as Jackson turned the tide. His every action was a testament to humanity's strength, not just in physical prowess, but in tactical brilliance and unshakable determination. Where the others saw weakness, Jackson saw an opportunity to strike, to survive. The remaining mercenaries began to hesitate. The reputation of the Terran warrior had started to shift, slowly at first. They expected an easy victory, but what they found instead was a man who wouldn't back down. One by one, the mercenaries fell, incapacitated by Jackson's fast, efficient attacks. The fight was over in mere minutes, and the room fell silent once more. Jackson stood, breathing heavily but composed, surveying the aftermath. The alien ambassador had been saved, and the immediate threat was neutralized. Slowly, the galactic leaders who had once regarded him with disdain began to look at him with something else. Respect, if only a glimmer of it. For Jackson, it was just another day. He knew this would be only the beginning. The galaxy's view of humanity would change now, whether they liked it or not. He had no doubt that the enemies of peace would be back, and when they did, he would be ready. But for now, he allowed himself a moment's satisfaction. The weak had just proven they were capable of more than the galaxy could ever imagine. The aftermath of the mercenary attack left the summit in stunned silence. Delegates who had once treated Jackson Riker like a mere token now watched him with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. The mercenaries were neutralized, but the tension in the room was palpable. The council had expected a ceremonial protector, a token figurehead with little more use than to stand in the background. Instead, they had seen the deadly precision of a warrior who was anything but weak. The alien representatives, still shaken from the ambush, began murmuring amongst themselves. Some looked at the Terran bodyguard with renewed suspicion, while others seemed to regard him with something akin to begrudging respect. None of them could deny that Jackson had been instrumental in saving the summit. His cool-headedness, his ability to read the situation and respond with tactical brilliance, had been the deciding factor. While the council took time to reorganize and begin discussions again, the seeds of doubt had been planted in their minds. Perhaps humanity wasn't as weak as they'd thought. The next day, as the summit resumed, the conversation turned to the threat that had just been neutralized. A sense of unease hung over the room as leaders discussed the mercenaries' origins. These were no ordinary criminals. They were well-trained, well-funded, and connected to a shadowy network that spanned several galactic sectors. The council realized that the peace talks might not just be a matter of diplomacy. They might be a matter of survival. Captain Jackson Riker, who had stood mostly silent during the deliberations, was called upon once again. A Xandari general, one of the galaxy's most feared warriors, glanced over at the Terran warrior with a calculating look. "You handled yourself well yesterday, human," General Vlarath said with a snort. "But that was small time. The real threats are out there. You'll find that your strength won't be enough when faced with an army, not a band of mercenaries." Jackson's gaze never wavered. An army can be beaten. It's all about strategy and knowing your enemy. Vlarath's lips curled into a smirk. "Is that so? I'll have to see it for myself." The challenge was clear. The general, a hulking figure of muscle and sharp combat instincts, doubted that a human could ever match the power of the galaxy's most established species. Over the next few days, the council arranged for a demonstration. They would pit Jackson against a squad of their best soldiers, the elite operatives of the Xandari, to see if he truly had what it took. It would be a controlled environment, a mock battle designed to test Jackson's skills. The council expected it to be a quick and humiliating defeat. On the day of the demonstration, the tension in the room was palpable. Jackson stood alone in the arena, facing the elite squad of Xandari soldiers. The aliens were heavily armed, their combat suits enhanced with the latest technology. They were faster, stronger, and better equipped than any Terran soldier. The odds were not in Jackson's favor. But Jackson wasn't worried. He'd been outnumbered before. He'd fought against far more dangerous odds. His mind was already running through the possibilities, analyzing every piece of the environment, calculating escape routes, and identifying weaknesses. To the Xandari, it would seem like the perfect setup for a humiliating victory. The Xandari soldiers advanced, confident in their superiority. But as they closed in, Jackson didn't make the first move. Instead, he observed, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, with blinding speed, he darted forward, exploiting a gap in their formation. In an instant, he had taken down the first soldier, disarming them with a swift maneuver that left the alien disoriented and helpless. The remaining soldiers hesitated, surprised by the human's audacity. That brief moment of uncertainty was all Jackson needed. He darted between cover, used the terrain to his advantage, and systematically dismantled the squad. Each soldier was neutralized with surgical precision. He used their own tactics against them, learning from their movements and predicting their next steps. Within minutes, the demonstration was over. Jackson stood alone, his opponents lying incapacitated on the floor, their weapons scattered. The room was silent. General Vlarath, his face unreadable, was the first to speak. "Impressive," he muttered. "I've never seen anything like it." For the first time, the Council of Galaxies was forced to acknowledge a truth they had long refused to accept. Humanity was not just a weak species. It was a species capable of adapting, surviving, and conquering in ways no one had predicted. And that was just the beginning. The Xandari elite soldiers lay sprawled across the arena floor, defeated and humiliated. Their defeat was swift, brutal, and entirely unexpected. The room was thick with tension, as delegates and military leaders from various species processed the spectacle they had just witnessed. A human, a species they had long considered weak, had just dismantled some of the most formidable soldiers in the galaxy. Jackson stood in the center of the arena, breathing heavily but composed. His mind raced, already processing the next steps, already analyzing how he could turn this moment into a victory for humanity. He didn't care about the victory for himself. This was about sending a message, one that the galaxy could no longer ignore. As the room fell into stunned silence, it was General Vlarath who spoke first, breaking the quiet. His voice, once filled with mockery, now held a note of genuine admiration. "Your tactics were unorthodox, human," Vlarath said, his eyes scanning Jackson with newfound respect. "I did not expect such adaptability. What other surprises do you have?" Jackson gave a simple nod in acknowledgement, but he said nothing. He wasn't here to boast or engage in further discussion. The point had already been made. For a brief moment, a sense of uncertainty rippled through the gathered species. The galaxy's elites had long prided themselves on their superior combat abilities, and they were now faced with the truth. Humanity had something they hadn't anticipated: an unpredictable edge. While Vlyrath and the other military leaders began discussing strategy in hushed tones, a new voice broke through the murmur of the crowd. A voice filled with a cold, commanding presence. "It seems the human is not as weak as we believed." The voice belonged to Captain Nair, the leader of the Zholar, an ancient species known for its unfathomable wisdom and cunning. The Zholar were revered throughout the galaxy, their understanding of warfare and tactics unparalleled. They had never been bested in battle, and their species was often called upon as advisors in matters of intergalactic conflict. Jackson didn't need to see Naor to understand the gravity of the situation. The Zholar's respect was hard-earned and could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. He was no longer just a mere human warrior. He was a symbol of something larger. "Tell me," Naor continued, "how is it that you, a human, possess such resilience? The galaxy has never seen a species quite like yours. What drives you?" Jackson paused, his mind drifting back to Earth. It wasn't the technology or the advanced weaponry that made humans dangerous. It was their spirit. It was the same spirit that had driven them to the stars, the same spirit that had allowed them to overcome their greatest challenges. No matter the odds, no matter how bleak the situation, humans found a way to fight, to survive, to push forward. He stood tall, eyes steady, and for the first time, he allowed himself to speak the truth. "It's because we never give up," he said simply. "We fight when others would yield. We adapt when others would falter. The Terran spirit isn't about strength. It's about the will to survive. We never stop trying, no matter what the universe throws at us." Naor regarded him in silence for a long moment, as though weighing his words. Finally, the ancient alien nodded. "It is impressive," he murmured, as though acknowledging a hard-earned truth. In that moment, something shifted. The Zholar, long seen as a neutral force in the galaxy, began to reconsider their stance on humanity. They had never taken humans seriously before, but the events unfolding before them now forced them to reevaluate. Across the room, whispers spread like wildfire. The alien species who had once dismissed humans now exchanged uncertain glances. The peace talks, which had once seemed like a mere formality, had now taken on a new sense of urgency. The galaxy was starting to realize that humanity, once thought weak and inconsequential, was something much more dangerous. A species that could not be predicted, that could not be easily contained. Jackson didn't celebrate. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken louder than any words could. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for far too long, and now they would have to face the consequences. The true test was just beginning. The atmosphere in the room was charged with an electric tension. For the first time, the galaxy's greatest leaders were forced to reckon with humanity's unexpected strength. The mercenary attack had been thwarted, the Xandari soldiers defeated, and the words of Jackson Riker, the Terran warrior, resonated in the minds of everyone present. But what came next was far more complicated than a simple military victory. The peace talks, which had once seemed like little more than a diplomatic formality, were now under a different light. The fragile balance of power in the galaxy was teetering on the brink of change, and the Council was beginning to understand the true potential of humanity. The room buzzed with low conversations as species who had once looked down on humanity now studied them with new eyes. There was a moment of silence when the Terran ambassador, who had been sitting quietly through all of this, stood up to address the assembly. His voice was calm but carried the weight of everything that had happened. "The galaxy has underestimated us for far too long," the ambassador said, his eyes scanning the room, making contact with each leader present. "We are more than just the sum of our technology or our numbers. We have something else, the will to push forward, no matter the odds. It is time for you to recognize that." His words hit harder than the earlier combat demonstration, leaving a lasting impression. Humans were no longer content with being considered mere observers. They were fighters, survivors, and they were making their presence known. At the far end of the room, General Vlarath of the Xandari stepped forward, his towering form imposing even in the midst of so many other powerful beings. He had been silent since the demonstration, but now his voice rang out. "Perhaps there is more to your species than I originally thought," Vlarath admitted, his tone low but sincere. "The Xandari have always prided ourselves on our military might, and yet we have never faced anything like this. I respect that." The Xandari general's admission was a turning point. Until now, his species had viewed humanity as little more than an insignificant nuisance. The fact that he acknowledged the Terran's skills was a monumental shift. It wasn't just a fleeting compliment. It was a recognition of humanity's newfound place in the galaxy's pecking order. But not all were so quick to accept the Terran presence. Captain Nair of the Zholar, who had once seemed intrigued by humanity's resolve, now raised an eyebrow. "We shall see," Nair said, his ancient eyes glimmering with calculated wisdom. "Your resolve is admirable, but talk is cheap. The galaxy is not one with words alone. There are forces beyond the Council, beyond any of us, who may see your presence as a threat." Jackson Riker, standing off to the side, heard those words clearly. The Zholar were known for their diplomacy and subtlety, and their words carried weight. They had no illusions about the galaxy's true power dynamics. To them, humanity was still an unknown, an unpredictable force that had the potential to either disrupt the delicate balance or bring about a new era of peace. But Jackson didn't flinch. His mission wasn't to win allies with diplomacy or promises. His mission was simple: to ensure humanity's survival and secure their place among the stars. The galaxy might not be ready to accept humans as equals, but they would be forced to. As the meeting progressed, a shift began to take place. The once mocked humans were slowly being drawn into the conversations. For the first time, the Terran delegation was being asked questions, considered for alliances, and treated with the respect previously reserved for the most powerful species in the galaxy. Jackson could feel it in the air. The change was coming. But with the rising recognition came new challenges. The forces who saw humanity's emergence as a threat were already preparing their next moves. The mercenary attack was just a small taste of what was to come. The Council was divided. Some wanted to extend the hand of peace to the Terrans, while others, like the Zholar, remained cautious, their minds calculating the long-term implications of humanity's growing influence. Jackson could feel the eyes of the galaxy upon him, and he knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle, one where diplomacy and military strength would collide. Humanity had made its mark, but now they had to prove they could hold it. The peace talks, once a routine formality, had turned into a battleground of its own. The Terran delegation, led by Jackson Riker, was no longer a mere side note in the galaxy's politics. Humanity had earned its place at the table, but the galaxy was not yet ready to accept them as equals. The recognition had come, but so too had the fear of what humanity might represent. Days passed after the summit, and the Council's meetings continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The alliances that had once seemed unbreakable began to show signs of fracture. The Xandari, while still admiring Jackson's combat prowess, remained guarded, their military-first mentality at odds with the diplomatic gestures extended by some of the Council members. Meanwhile, the Zholar, the galaxy's most ancient race, seemed more concerned about the long-term ramifications of humanity's rise than offering any overt support. It was clear to Jackson that the galaxy's elite were divided. But even as the Council debated the potential of human integration into galactic affairs, the quiet stirrings of a far darker force were beginning to make themselves known. Late one evening, as Jackson stood in his quarters overlooking the star-filled expanse of the galactic capital, his comms device buzzed with an urgent message. The voice on the other end was strained, frantic. "Captain Riker," the voice said, "we've received reports of a large fleet assembling at the edge of the Perseus sector. They are preparing to move toward the capital. It's not any faction within the Council. These ships belong to the Karzar." The mention of the Khazar sent a chill down Jackson's spine. The Khazar were an ancient enemy, long thought to be extinct. Their reputation as ruthless marauders and destroyers had haunted the galaxy for centuries. No one knew exactly what had happened to them, but their sudden reappearance was nothing short of disastrous. "They're not part of the Council?" Jackson asked, his voice low, the weight of the situation settling over him. "No, Captain. The Khazar operate outside the Council's control, and they are known for their unrelenting aggression. Their fleet is enormous. If they're coming, they won't stop until they've shattered everything in their path. And they've set their sights on the capital." Jackson's mind raced. This was no longer just a diplomatic crisis. It was a full-scale war waiting to happen. The Khazar had never been known for their subtlety. If they were attacking, it would be with everything they had. There was no reasoning with them, no negotiations. The only language they understood was destruction. He quickly activated a secure channel and reached out to the Terran ambassador. "We need to prepare the fleet. We can't wait for the Council to act. The Khazar are coming, and they'll be on us within days." The ambassador's voice came through, calm but filled with urgency. "We've already begun preparations, Captain, but we need your expertise. We don't have the firepower to match them in a conventional battle. We'll need your tactics, your leadership to guide us through this." Jackson glanced out at the stars, knowing the gravity of the task ahead. For all the political victories humanity had won, this was the true test. The galaxy may have underestimated humanity's spirit, but the Khazar would not be swayed by speeches or diplomacy. It was time for humanity to prove its true worth on the battlefield. The galaxy's elite might have viewed humanity as an upstart species, but they were about to learn a hard truth. The Terran warrior was not only a force to be reckoned with on the ground. They were about to see just how deadly humanity could be when backed into a corner. Jackson was ready. But the question remained, was the galaxy? The warning came too late. The Khazar fleet had already emerged from the depths of the Perseus sector and was rapidly approaching the galactic capital. Jackson Riker had no time to waste. Every part of him was focused on the task at hand, defending the capital, protecting humanity's newfound position in the galaxy, and ensuring that the galaxy would never again underestimate Terran resolve. The preparations had been swift. The Council's military forces, including the Terran fleet, were on high alert. But Jackson knew the reality of the situation. No amount of preparation could fully match the Khazar's overwhelming numbers. The ancient marauders were known for their brutal, relentless combat style, employing shock tactics that often left their enemies with little room to counterattack. Their warships were colossal, bristling with weapons capable of reducing entire fleets to ashes. Jackson stood at the command center, watching the holographic displays as the Khazar ships loomed ever closer. His mind was sharp, calculating, but underneath that cold exterior, a fire burned. Humanity's moment to truly prove itself had arrived. The council members were huddled in the nearby war room, anxiously awaiting any word of the enemy's movements. General Vlareth of the Xandari, his expression unreadable, stood beside the Terran ambassador. "This will not be a conventional battle," Jackson said, his voice cutting through the tense air. "The Khazar rely on overwhelming force and chaos. We can't fight them head-on and expect to win. Our strength lies in our adaptability. This will be a battle of wits, not sheer numbers." "What do you propose?" General Vlareth asked, his tone skeptical. Jackson didn't hesitate. "We hit them where they're weakest. The Khazar are ruthless, but they're not invincible. They're overconfident in their numbers, and that's where we have the advantage. We'll break their formation using guerrilla tactics and draw them into a trap. Once we've isolated their flagship, we can strike." The others exchanged uneasy glances. They had never seen such confidence from a human before, especially in the face of such an overwhelming threat. But in Jackson's eyes, there was no hesitation, no doubt. This was what he was trained for. Within hours, the Terran fleet was in position. Ships from various factions, Sandari, Joller, and others, took their places alongside the Terran vessels, ready to execute Jackson's plan. The ships didn't look impressive compared to the Khazar's vast warships, but they were nimble, fast, and designed for precision strikes. Jackson's plan was to use their agility to draw the Khazar into tight, unpredictable formations. As the Khazar fleet moved closer, Jackson's strategy unfolded. The Terran and allied ships darted in and out of the Khazar lines, firing precision shots that disrupted their coordination. The Marauders tried to regroup, but they couldn't keep up with the rapid, unpredictable strikes. Jackson watched the unfolding battle through the command center's holographic display, eyes narrowed. The Khazar were growing frustrated, their ships scattering as they tried to engage the smaller, more maneuverable Terran vessels. That was when Jackson gave the order. Now. The Terran ships closed in, creating a pocket of chaos among the Khazar fleet. At the heart of the storm, Jackson's forces led a full-on assault against the Khazar flagship, a massive vessel surrounded by layers of defense. It was the beating heart of the entire fleet, and if it fell, the Khazar forces would crumble. The Terran fighters executed their attack with precision. Explosions rocked the Khazar flagship, the once pristine hull buckling under the concentrated fire. The flagship's shields flickered, then failed. The Terran forces didn't hesitate, following through with every move Jackson had planned. After what seemed like an eternity, the final blow was struck. The Khazar flagship erupted in a fiery explosion, its enormous structure breaking apart in space. The Khazar fleet, now leaderless and scattered, began to retreat. The Terran and allied forces pursued them with relentless precision, picking off stragglers and ensuring the victory was complete. The battle was won, and the galaxy's greatest threat had been shattered. Jackson Riker stood at the command center, his hands gripping the railing as he watched the final Khazar ships vanish into the distance. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his pulse was still racing from the adrenaline of the battle. But there was no time to rest. The galaxy had seen humanity's power, and now it was time for them to understand what it meant to face the Terran will. The capital was safe, but the war for the galaxy was far from over. The battle was over, but the echoes of its consequences rippled through the galaxy. The Khazar fleet was broken, their leaders destroyed, and their marauding ways shattered in a single decisive strike. Humanity had not only held its ground, but had emerged victorious, with a decisive blow that sent shockwaves through the galactic community. In the aftermath, the galactic capital was a whirlwind of activity. Ships from various factions, Skandar, Joller, and other allied species, buzzed around the planet, delivering supplies, reinforcements, and debriefing their forces. The Terran fleet, though battle-worn, stood tall in the aftermath. Their victory was not just a military one. It was a statement that would be remembered for centuries. Jackson Riker stood at the balcony of the Terran embassy, his eyes scanning the capital city below. He could see the gleaming towers of the various embassies, the flags of different species fluttering in the wind. The galaxy, once indifferent to humanity's presence, was now taking notice. The war for the capital had been won, but this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The Terran ambassador approached him, a look of awe and pride on his face. "Captain, the Council has called for an emergency session. They want to discuss the aftermath of the battle." Jackson didn't respond immediately, his gaze still fixed on the city. He was already thinking ahead, thinking about what came next. The battle was over, but humanity's place in the galaxy had only just begun. The galaxy's elite had seen the strength of the Terran warriors, and now they were demanding answers. Allies, former enemies, and those who had been hesitant. Everyone had questions. "We've made our mark, Ambassador," Jackson said, turning to face him. "But the real challenge comes now. The Khazar were just one threat. The galaxy is full of others who will see humanity as a new target. We have to be ready. We've earned the respect of the galaxy, but that's only going to make us more enemies." The ambassador nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The Council will listen. They have no choice now. The Shoaler are calling for a new strategy, one that involves humanity's direct participation. They want us to be an official part of the Council's defense structure. Jackson's expression hardened. Humanity had already made its stand, but now it seemed that the galaxy wanted to use them as a weapon. They didn't yet understand what it meant to ally with humans. It wasn't just about military strength. It was about the spirit that burned inside each Terran. The relentless will to survive and overcome, no matter the odds. They're thinking short-term, Jackson said, his voice low. They think we're just another force to wield. But we're not going to be anyone's weapon. We'll help, but on our terms. We've shown them what we're capable of. It's time they learn that we are not just here to fight their wars. The ambassador nodded in agreement, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. What do you suggest? Jackson paused, then turned back to the city, his eyes hardening with resolve. We push for more than just a seat at the table. Humanity doesn't just need to be a part of the Galactic Alliance. We need to lead. We need to secure our own future. We've proven our worth. Now it's time for the galaxy to prove theirs. The Terran ambassador swallowed, understanding the enormity of Jackson's words. For the first time, the idea of humanity not just as a participant, but as a leader in galactic affairs, began to take root. But the road ahead would not be easy. There would be resistance, especially from the old powers of the galaxy, who would see humanity's rise as a threat to their centuries-old dominance. Jackson Riker turned back toward the council hall, the weight of the moment settling in. The Karzar were only the beginning, and though the capital had been saved, the galaxy was far from secure. Humanity had made a statement, but now it was time to make a lasting change. He had earned the respect of the galaxy, but he knew that respect was only as strong as the next battle. The Terran warrior had proven what humanity could do, but now they had to prove what they could become. As Jackson walked toward the council meeting, the future of the galaxy lay uncertain. Humanity had proven its strength, but now it was time to show its vision. And the galaxy would never be the same.